Well, that's fantastic, Sebastian. Welcome to your session. Please, could you confirm if you are listening to my voice clearly, please? Because I had a problem in the other section with the audio. So, can you hear me properly? Okay, that's great. Perfect. That's the only thing that I need, to be heard so far. All right. So give me a second because I'm organizing myself in here with all this stuff. There you are. Good. I was wrapped in different wires, so I couldn't move. There you are. Hello there, Byron. How are you today? How is your life going so far? Good. That's perfect. Did you enjoy your day off on Tuesday? I think that you had a day off, right? On Tuesday. I mean, the previous Tuesday. Did you enjoy your student day? Or did you have to study a lot? All right, so we're going to start with the class immediately, guys. Boom. All right, so what we are going to do today, guys, has to do with this overview somehow, right, about the vehicle systems. Same things that you were presenting last class and in the previous class as well. Now, the difference in here is that I'm only going to mention some aspects of the vehicle systems because you have already talked about each of these systems in detail. So today, I think that I'm going to summarize somehow the information, right? Now let me search and look for the um, the files that I need to use for the class so far. Okay, so it has to be class number 14. Is this class number 14 or 15? Still wondering. Okay, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready. Just give me one more second, right, in order to find this. And there you are. Good. All right, people, I'm ready for you. So before we actually start working on this content of the summary of the vehicle systems that you have already presented, we're going to start our session by making some questions, right? As we used to do before the presentations. Remember that we always, right? We always work on this on this revision of contents, right? Previous to our classes. So let us begin. I have prepared some questions for you. Boom. Oh, but before we start the session, let me, introduce a little bit the topics that we are going to discuss today. In first place, right, we are going to recognize vocabulary which is related to the timing belt and some tools used when you have to carry out this procedure of changing or replacing a tire. We are also going to make some revision of grammar contents studied up to now, and we are going to talk about some vehicle systems, but it's in general terms, right, an overview. Now, this is the first part of the class. Next Monday, we are going to have the second part, right? And we are going to explain the other systems as well, right? And also, I'm going to have your grades by Monday. I couldn't make it, right? I tried to, to have your marks for today, but I was, checking the other sections, the other classes so far, so I couldn't bring your marks for today. But I promise it's going to be due to Monday. All right. First question from this quiz that we are going to have today. It says, what is the first thing that you should do if you are far from the steering wheel? Adjust the seat position or start the vehicle? What is the first thing that you are supposed to do once you are in the vehicle? Adjust the seat position or start the vehicle? What's the answer either? A or B? A or B? What do you think? A or B? What do you think is the answer in here for this very first question? Good. Also, we go for A. Thank you, Javier. Right. Adjust the seat position. Right. That's the first thing that we should consider to do in first place. Right. Let's find out the answer for our second question that says, which of the following options do not correspond to a vehicle system? Belts and hoses or additional gadgets in the car? B, right? Yes, because we have already studied a different vehicle system. And we know that this one in particular, right, is a system that is referring to the accessory belt, the elements in the cooling system, the timing belt, and so forth. Now, all these interior gadgets in here are not a system, right? Are only extra things that you add in order to tune up, right, somehow the vehicle, right? Boom. Now, this one is interesting. Remember that class in which we were studying elements of the engine? And we mentioned something that happens in some engines, right? We mentioned that there was a certain amount of engines that may face this problem. So let's take a look to the statement in here. It says, the timing belt breaks. The piston hits against the valves, which results in broken valves, damage on the piston surfaces, among other things. What are we talking about in here? Unsustainable valves or interference engine? According to this statement, what is the problem being shown in the picture? Unsustainable valves or interference engine? What should be the answer? So Javier goes for B, right? Anybody else goes for B? Javier says B. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What's the right answer for this one? What is the answer for this one, guys? Think about it a little bit. Javier says B, right? Good. Let's go there, right? It says, boom, the interference engine. For number four, let's read this statement. It provides nighttime visibility, signals and alerts other drivers, and supplies light for viewing instruments and vehicles interior. What is the system we are describing in here? A or B? Everyone goes for A. Very good, right? We are describing the lighting system so far. This final statement here, this one is referred as the most critical system of the vehicle. It allows the driver to reduce or slow the motion of the car. We are talking about the brake system, right? Excellent, right? Excellent. Now these questions, are really interesting because, um, you know, you are reinforcing all the information so far up to here. So that's good, right? Now we're going to change a little bit the topic again. Wait a second. All right, boom. There we are. Oh my gosh, I made a mistake there. Added the brake system under. Good. All right, so now we're going to have this overview about the brake system, right? Which is not that difficult, and is actually something that we have already talked about, right? We manage this context. We know about this information. So I'm going to describe a little bit, the lighting and wiper system that you have already talked, as I said before, about some systems. So what I'm doing here is mostly reinforcing the information that was provided um, in these presentations, right? So when we talk about the lighting and wiper, what can we say about this system? When we talk about, the lighting system, we could mention that this system, provides all the nighttime visibility, right? As the statement mentioned, right? There are some signal and other drivers, and also, right, supplies the instruments of the interior, right? The interior light, the interior instruments such as the dashboard, for example, the instrument panel, right? When you are driving at night, when you are driving during the daylight as well, you have all these lights that turn on in case of any warning or anything that happens so far, right? Then you have, right, the wiper system. What is the function of the wiper system, right? In few words, right? The wiper system is mostly um, in charge, right, of allowing the driver to have clear visibility on the road, right? So if you have some excessive, yeah, maintain the clear visibility. So if you are experiencing, I don't know, some rainy conditions, some dirt or dust around, you may use these wipers in order to clean up the windshield and have a better visibility of the way, right, on the road while you are driving so far. Then you have the brake system. Now this is interesting because a lot of students spoke about, right, the brake system. Some of you, put attention, I mean, pay attention, sorry, pay attention to the function mostly. Some others refer about the elements that build up the brake system, and some others, put emphasis on the failures and solutions of the brake system, right, during the presentations. So far, right, we have already explained what is the function of the brake system and how the brake system works so far. We also know that we have two type of brakes somehow, right? The drum brakes, the disc brakes, right, and so on. So what happens in here when we describe the brake system? We have that whenever the driver presses or steps right on the brake system, there is a force that is generated. Now this force, right, moves the master cylinder, and at the same time, the master cylinder, pushes, right, the brake fluid through the hydraulic lines to the calipers, right? Once you have once you have reached that point, right, the brake pads, right, start, you know being pressed against the rotor. And what happens when the brake pads are pressed against the rotor? There is a friction that is produced during the process, so the temperature start increasing somehow, and the result is to reduce, right, or the reduction of the speed of the vehicle while you are driving so far, right? That is how, in general terms, the brake system works so far. Now, when we talk about this other system, right, the fuel system, now this is a very complex system and it's a very complete in terms of the information. So, again, I'm also going to give you a general view of these systems somehow, right? So we know that there are different elements that build up this structure. We have seen a little, of the fuel system during our classes, especially when we talk about the injectors, right? When we talk about the injectors, we know that these small units or small pieces, right, are spraying, right, different amounts of fuel in order to allow, this air fuel mixture in the interior of the cylinder, and therefore, right, this cycle of the internal combustion when we were, talking about that in our previous classes. We also can say that the fuel system, right, transfers, right, that fuel from the tank and it is passed through the fuel filter in order to strain, right, the fuel before it arrives to the injectors. Another important element that you have in here is the pressure regulator, which controls, right, the fuel pressure to make sure that the engine performance, right, keep constant, right, and to be the operation to be efficient as well. What other information do we have in here, right? The fuel injectors, when they are activated, right, they spray, right, a meter, una cantidad, ¿verdad? Que es milimetrada, ¿verdad? Contada, amount of fuel into the engine as well. We also have, the starting, charging, and battery system. Now, the battery, if we wanted to describe the battery in depth, you know that we have lots of elements that build up also the structure of the battery somehow. The main function, right, is that it stores this electrical, right, current in the battery, right? And also we know that the battery, converts this electrical energy that is stored in the battery into what? Into mechanical force in order to what? To turn the engine for the starting, right? That's one of the main functions. We also know that we have an alternator, right? We have an ignition module, right, as well. And also you have this belt that transmits the power right from the front of the engine to the alternators fully, along with some other accessories as well, right? What other thing can we say in here about the battery, right? As I said before, we have the alternator, right? We have the ignition module in here that turns these low voltage supplies to the ignition coil para las bobinas, ¿verdad? And the coil produces the high voltage for the ignition system as well. Cuando sube este material, chiquillos, ustedes se van a encontrar que tenemos distintos links para acceder a algunos videos. Ahora, los videos que están aquí tienen la función de cumplir como un complemento a la información general que se está entregando acá. Algunos videos que hablan un poco de la mantención del sistema, otros que hablan un poco, como les describía, de elementos adicionales, ¿verdad?, del sistema en cuestión. Así que es bien completo en ese sentido. Y eso es lo que vamos a ir revisando después también más adelante para ir estudiando for the upcoming test so far, right? Okay, now we are going to change again the topic, right? And we are going to discuss and describe, right, different elements that we learned before the presentations, right? When we talk about vocabulary, do you remember that in our previous classes we talked about a little bit about the tools that sometimes you use at the workshop or that you regularly use at the workshop, right? Some of the tools. And some of these elements, right, are also used in order to carry out different procedures, such as, for example, elements that you use in order to change or replace a flat tire. So in here, in this very first part of this vocabulary part in the session, we have different elements that help us to carry out this process when we want to replace or change a tire, right? Let's identify this element. ¿Cuáles son los elementos que tenemos acá, chiquillos? All right, so we have in one way, right, in the middle, we have the spare tire. Here in the very beginning, we have the jack, the spare tire, as Sebastian mentioned, and also, right, we have the wheel chocks or the wheel blocks used to what? To uh block, the tire, right? Then we have below the jack the toe wrench, the wheel brace, and the wheel nuts. We use both of these in order to loosen or tighten the wheel nuts whenever we are carrying out this procedure, right? Now keep in mind this vocabulary for a little while, right? keep in mind this vocabulary because you have to use it now in the upcoming exercises in here. With the previous vocabulary, with the jack, with the spare tire, with the wheel brace, with the torque wrench as well, I need you to complete these exercises from 1 to 6 using the vocabulary, okay? I'm going to give you 5 minutes in order to do this, right? Once we finish, I'm going to ask for your answers in order to correct this, right? And also, I'm going to use these 5 minutes because I need to look uh, for something, right? Let's keep working on this. Well, very good, guys. Very good. Okay, give me a second in order to start, checking the answers so far. So yes, we use the jack in order to lift the vehicle from the ground, right? Or right to lift up the vehicle. You have a way to refer about that anyway. What else do we have in here for our second answer? It says this element is often used to replace a flat tire. That is the spare tire, right? As Sebastian mentioned up there. Then in number three, we have this element or this tool is used to tighten the wheel nuts. Now, this one in number three and number four, right, there is no difference actually, right? There are some tools that you can use for both to loosen or to tighten. So in here we have, I'm going to give you the answer for number three and four. You have the torque wrench on the wheel brace as well, right? There you are. Very good, guys. Very good. For number five, now you can do number five and number six. Number five says some of these elements, right, are placed on the opposite tire, thinking about that you are carrying out, this process, right, this procedure of changing the tire. The wheel blocks or the wheel chocks, right? You can use both in order to refer about that one. And finally, we have to produce, you need to loosen the wheel bolts or the wheel nut as well. Very good there. Good. Boom. Now, when we talk about, right, the engine, you may remember, right, that we identify different elements in there as well, right? We identify some of the elements that build up the structure, and also we describe a little bit the function of these elements as well. So in here we have the whole picture of these elements. Let's do the exercise and let's identify what we have so far. What are these elements in the upper section of the engine? Here, in number one, what do you identify in number one so far? That is the camshafts, right? Then we have in number two an intake and an outlet. What are these things in there? These are the valves, right? In number three, we have, well, it looks like the arrow is pointing to the piston head, right? But this is the piston. And what is in there in the middle of the piston? The piston rings as well, right? Good. Then for number four, we have this structure in here. This is the crankshaft. Nicely done. Number five, what is in number five? What is that in number five? Remember, that element connects the piston to the crankshaft. The piston rod or the connecting rod. Very good, right? That was a tricky one. That was a tricky one. Then we have in here, these elements, these rounded elements that supports, right, the movement of the of this bell. These are the pulleys, right? And finally, we have the timing belt. And what is the main function of the timing belt? Do you remember that? What's the main function of the timing belt? We have explained, right, somehow that the timing belt main function is to synchronize, right, the movement of the pistons together with the opening and closing times of the valves, right? We also mentioned that whenever you have a problem with the engine and suddenly the timing belt breaks, right? That is the interference engine in which you are, I mean, that's the correct words, right? Those are the correct words in order to refer about this failure that some engines experience sometimes, right? When they have this broken timing belt and they lost all this synchronization somehow, right? All right, so let's take a look to this. Keep this vocabulary in mind because our following task is about the use of this vocabulary, right? So let's see what do we have to do in task number 2. In task number 2, we have exercises from 1 to 8. We need to complete each of the spaces that are in there, each of the empty spaces with the vocabulary that is in here, right? We need to complete these statements in order to allow the information to make sense whenever we read it, right? So let's take 5 again in order to complete each of these elements so far, right? It's not difficult, it's easy. Right, so let's find out your answer so far, right? I was giving you the time. Remember that I give you time in order to allow some other students as well to complete each of the exercises, right? So number one in here, we have this element synchronizes the rotation of the crankshaft together with the piston. And Bastian answered that is the timing belt together with the camshafts, right? Then we have these elements support the movements of the timing belt. What is there in number two? What is in there for number two? Yep, we are talking about the pulleys in here, right? And we have a tensioner pulley and idle pulley, right? And so on. Then we have it here. This tool connects the piston to the crankshaft. It is known as the This tool connects the pistons to the crankshaft. We are talking about the This tool connects the pistons to the crankshaft. What are we talking about here? The connecting rod, right? Very good. So here we have this tool connects, right, the pistons to the crankshaft. It is known as the connecting rod. Number four, it says this one transforms the linear motion into rotational. This transforms the Very good, the crankshaft. Very good, Sebastian. Number five, in the internal combustion, this element compresses the air-fuel mixture. The piston compresses the air-fuel mixture. Very good. Number six, during the internal combustion, this element opens to let air into the chamber. Once the gases are burnt, the opens to expel the remains of the mixture. What are we talking about in here? The intake valve, right, opens to let air into the chamber. Once the gases are burnt, the exhaust valve opens, right, to expel the remaining gases of the mixture. Number seven, the intake and the exhaust valve are opened by the what? Are opened by the What is the element that produces that movement? The camshaft. Very good, Sebastian, right? So it's opened by the camshaft so far. Then, finally, one function of these elements is to seal the combustion chamber. That is the piston ring. Very good, Sebastian. Nice. So here are the answers for these concepts that we've been studying so far throughout unit number two, right? We still need to keep working on the other elements and the other vehicle systems as well. Now let's take a look to the following exercises. Now the ones that are coming now are exercises based on the use of the prepositions of place and movement in different context situations. remember that the use of preposition is relevant to the information that we are working so far in our descriptions. Whenever when we want to describe a procedure, whenever we want to talk about position or placement, we use these prepositions of place. Now, in this time, I use different pictures, right? Because I remember that in our previous class, right, before starting the presentations, we saw these prepositions, right? But the pictures were kind of confusing. So I found some other pictures that are now better, right? Son mucho más explicativas de esta forma, ¿verdad? Que ustedes las pueden ver allí. Entonces tenemos el uso de through, in. Recuerden que in es estático. Si queremos decir que algo tuvo un movimiento para llegar a un lugar, we use into. Against es cuando estás en contra de algo, ¿verdad? Te apoyas contra el auto, te apoyas contra la pared, te apoyas contra la puerta, etc. Right? And so on. Okay, so what do we have to do in here? We are going to use each of these prepositions in order to complete the information that we are reading in these exercises from 1 to 6, right? Good, Byron, good. That was very fast. So we are going to give you the first one. The caliper presses the brake pads against the rotor, right? Okay, let's keep working on number 2 to number 6, right? I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. Yo creo que con 2 o 3 minutos estamos bien aquí para que vayamos trabajando todos en estas respuestas y así después podamos ir revisando también. ¿Ya, chiquillos? Through. That's number 6, right? Let's find out. Let's find out. You were really fast. Let's see what we have then. So the air-fuel mixture gets into the cylinder in the first stroke, right? Then I put different gadgets where inside my new car, right? In the interior of my car. So then we have, there were a lot of police cars around my uncle's track. We couldn't move to any side. There is a person between a Camaro and a motorcycle. He's right in the middle. And she walked through that door and left the room without a word. Now, recuerden, chiquillos, que cuando utilizamos between, it's something that is in the middle, but only, between two things, entre dos cosas, ¿verdad? Estás en el medio. Y cuando utilizamos among, right, también estamos entre medio, pero entre medio de muchas más cosas, entre medio de muchas personas, entre medio de muchos más objetos, ¿verdad? Que estamos siendo ahí, estamos en el medio, ¿verdad? Estamos siendo rodeados en el fondo. Important thing to keep in mind. Up to here, do you have any question? Any questions so far, guys, based on what we are studying and also perfect. That's the idea. Good. Very good. All right. Chiquillos, con respecto a sus notas y las presentaciones. Como les dije al principio, ¿verdad? I couldn't make it for today, no las pude tener lista para hoy, pero sí ya para el lunes van a estar listas, al menos las de las secciones del día lunes, voy a tener listas las calificaciones de las presentaciones, así que espero también poder subirlas el fin de semana. Recuerden que el fin de semana también es feriado y es feriado porque son las votaciones, right? So you have to go there. Entonces, vamos a continuar, chiquillos, con el closing of the class so far. Boom, right? And let's sum up all the information that we were discussing so far in here. ¿Ya? Bueno, como dato de cierre, chiquillos, antes de avanzar en esto, bueno, mencionarles, ahora que he hecho una segunda revisión de las presentaciones, no he puesto las notas, pero sí he podido revisar las grabaciones nuevamente. Debo mencionar de que están muy bien, ¿verdad? Los contextos que se fueron trabajando, ¿verdad? La presentación, digo, en el contexto que se trabajó está bastante bien realizada. Los identificaron los elementos que eran pertinentes, pusieron distintos énfasis. Bien, creo que eso estaba mencionado yo hace un rato también. Distintos énfasis. Si bien hay informaciones que se fueron, o sistemas que se fueron repitiendo, ¿verdad? En algún momento, todos tuvieron una forma diferente de poder abordarlo y poner un foco o un énfasis en distintos tópicos, ¿verdad? Algunos tenían un índice más fuerte, un énfasis más fuerte, digo, en lo que era la función del sistema. Estaba muy marcado en algunos lo que era la función del sistema. Otros, sin embargo, ¿verdad? Fueron poniendo énfasis en lo que eran las fallas y las soluciones preventivas y correctivas. Como también otras personas, ¿verdad? Que identificaron elementos y describieron los elementos con mucho detalle. Entonces, eso fue lo interesante de abordar aquí en las presentaciones también. Al menos desde mi perspectiva como profesor, yo les digo que creo que es estuvieron bastante bien trabajadas y pudieron por lo menos cubrir lo que era la estructura de lo que se había pedido para las presentaciones. Eh, Aparte de ello, ¿verdad? O sea, yo todavía no lo estoy todavía revisando con la rúbrica en cuestión, ¿verdad? Y con la rúbrica ya vamos a empezar a determinar, ¿verdad? Un poco más lo que es la parte numérica. O sea, se entiende también que una presentación que es realizada en un idioma del cual no estamos habituados a utilizar todos los días, se hace un poco más complejo, ¿cierto? Es un poco más complejo porque es un vocabulario distinto e incluso no es un inglés convencional, es un inglés técnico, por lo que dificulta a veces un poco más, ¿verdad? También abordar un determinado tema del que se pueda estar conversando, del que se pueda estar hablando, del que se pueda estar intentando explicar. Y frente a eso, ¿verdad? Y teniendo aquello en mente, yo considero que de verdad fueron haciendo todos muy bien su presentación en esos términos generales, ¿verdad? Eh, Espero también que la experiencia para ustedes haya sido gratificante, ¿verdad? Que hayan podido también tener esta oportunidad de utilizar una vez más, ¿verdad? El inglés en un contexto que es un poquito más complejo, ¿verdad? En este asignatura que es más bien técnica y que utiliza un vocabulario mucho más, eh, ¿verdad? Más rebuscado en ese sentido, ¿verdad? Que el del convencional. Nosotros no hablamos con este vocabulario, ¿verdad? En nuestro inglés todos los días, ¿verdad? Entonces, con esa información ya mencionada, chiquillos, podemos decir de que acabamos, ¿verdad?, con nuestras presentaciones. Y ahora lo que procede es comenzar simplemente a calificarlas. Pero lo que a mí me importa es que el proceso, ¿verdad?, de aprendizaje de ustedes o el proceso de preparación haya sido realmente significativo más allá de la calificación que se pueda obtener luego. Bien, eso es importante siempre. All right, so to sum up, today we review, some of the contents studied up to now. We also recognize and identify vocabulary that we have already studied in our previous sessions, right? But at the same time, right, we reinforce the vocabulary and also we apply this vocabulary in different examples that were required to be completed using these words. We also talk about some vehicle system in general terms because you have already presented about all of these systems. So Now we are only going to summarize the information, right, and to give general ideas about the system. That's why it's called a vehicle overview, right? Because it's not in detail, only the general terms, mainly functions, some elements maybe, because you have already talked about that in your presentations. Up to here, do you have any doubts, any questions, anything that you would like to add before we finish? No questions, guys? Any comment based, either in your presentations or in your in the class of today? Nope, nope. All right, so next Monday we are going to gather together again in our class, right? And also, right, we are going to talk about, right, the upcoming evaluations, the upcoming dates, and so on, right? Para que tengan ahí claridad de lo que vamos a estar haciendo el lunes. Bien, chiquillos, hoy terminamos un poquito antes, basado en la información que estábamos trabajando, ¿ya? Que tengan buen día, chiquillos. Gracias por asistir a su clase y nos estamos viendo. Hasta luego. Bye bye. Take care, everyone. See you. It was nice to meet you all today.